Welcome, viewers. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity here today to welcome a very distinguished businessman from Pakistan. His name is Khalid Awan. Khalid is the co-founder and chairman of TCS Logistics. TCS Logistics is probably one of the biggest businesses in Pakistan. It is a courier company, and just to give you an idea of the scale of the business, it carries something like 120 million shipments in the year, both nationally and internationally. It has 720 units, offices throughout Pakistan, and it employs in excess of 10,000 people. It is truly a privilege to welcome Khalid here. The purpose of the conversation is not necessarily just to talk about TCS, but the main purpose is that I wish Khalid can give us a masterclass in how to run a world-class business headquartered in Pakistan under such difficult trading conditions. So, Khalid, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
At TVapex in London. It's a privilege to have you here, Khalid. But before we go into our nitty-gritty of business strategy, can we talk about Khalid as a person first? A little bit to get a feel from where you come from. I know that you come from a very modest background. I think you were born in Dera Ismail Khan, and your father was a government civil servant, modest job. Tell us a little bit about your younger days. How did you grow up? What did you do?
Interesting. Yes, I grew up in a small town.
Yes.
And I was born a few months after Pakistan came into being. My father was a second-generation police officer.
Okay.
Very much nurtured in the traditions of discipline and honor of service. My grandfather had served with the with the police service also, and risen to a high rank in the police. And my father, as a second generation, joined in the British time and retired after Pakistan came into being.
Yeah.
I think if I was to think back, that was a time, the early 50s and the 60s were times when I grew up with a lot of hope and a lot of optimism for a new country having come up.
Okay, so you had a...
And there were dreams and there were a lot of hopes. And we enjoyed reading the newspaper. And Pakistan was then coming up, a lot of institutions. There's some very fine institutions in those days. I remember traveling across the country by Pakistan Railways. And
it was a real luxury those days.
And the railways was a luxury. I mean, traveling in what was then if you were fortunate to travel in the air-conditioned first class, where the uniformed conductors would welcome you on the platform. Yeah. So those
good
were
days.
heady days.
Good days.
And dreamy days. Yeah.
But Khalid, you just said to me something quite important. You said that you were brought up in a traditional way with good values. I think you mentioned, and in those days, I think the value system was different to what it is in Pakistan now. Maybe that's something that we can carry forward in our discussions as we go. But for now, tell me a little bit about your education.
Yeah, my father being in the government service, naturally, they would move from town to town. So my early education was not more than a few years in every school. But I was the youngest of my siblings, and so by the time I was in my class 7, my father retired.
Wow.
And as an honest police officer, he had not even made a house of his own. And so after retirement, it was a very simple plan: go back home to the ancestral home and go back to from where you came from
the village,
the city of Dera Ismail Khan. And I was then studying in an English school in Multan.
Right.
And so it really meant that, okay, now going back to the to the roots since Deir Ismail Khan. My father would go and he thought he would repair his old inherited house that he had inherited from his father, make it livable. But one of the worries on his part, okay, what to do with my schooling? Here I was in an English medium school. There was no English medium school, and I was in the middle of my academic year. So a very sort of a innovative solution was thought. Well, the school headmaster at that time, the headmistress, she was a nun, a principal, and she said, okay, if he's got to go back, he's done pretty well in his class 7, he's doing well in class 8, and if he's not going to have any schooling, why don't you do some private tuitions, and instead of class 8, why can't he sit for the metric, and I'm sure he will be able to scrape through.
So double promotion.
so basically it was decided I'd go back home, do some private tuitions, and file for the metric examination, register for that.
So you fast-tracked.
And so I did that. I was fortunate to have a very good teacher whom I used to go every evening, 2 hours every evening.
Yeah, I know you told me a story about, I think you had visions of being in show business.
And at that time, my older brother had a job as a general manager of an engineering firm in Karachi.
Okay.
So he and my family suggested I go and stay with him, and Karachi is a good job market, and we'll look for a job over there. So I went and I stayed with him, and it was during the time that I was staying with him that the year was 1967 now, and Karachi started its first television channel. Pakistan TV started broadcasting for 4 hours every day from 6 to 10.
Black and white, I think.
Black and white. And so the television was a big highlight. And but one of the things I found very interesting was used to be the news, because newscasting, the main newscasting in Urdu and in English.
Very glamorous, I think.
Yes, very glamorous. And I one day just walked up to the Pakistan television headquarters in Karachi. Just walked in. I said, I want to see the general manager. And Aslam Azhar was then the general manager of Pakistan TV. And it was very easy to just walk into his room of the general manager. And he was sitting on his desk, and he just looked at me, and he started working back on his things. He says, yes, young man, what can I do for you? I said, sir, I like to be considered for English newscaster.
Just like that.
Just like that. I just said spontaneously. So without looking up, he didn't even look up. Without looking up, he says, okay, I've been in this business long enough, and my ears tell me that you don't have the right voice for it.
So it's a rejection.
So sorry to disappoint you, but you don't have the right voice. And he didn't even look up, and I just said, thank you very much, sir.
And you accepted it.
And I walked out.
But it does show, the build-up of your character, which we will try and follow through. And, I mean, again, just carrying on this job hunting, I mean, we're still at cruise level at the moment. We'll ramp up the story a bit. But I really like the way you got your first job, I think. And I think it's worth telling the story to illustrate, that sometimes in life you need to take the initiative and take the first step. You can't wait to stand back. And perhaps you'd like to share the story, because I think it's truly fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the easiest way. I had come to Karachi and I had come to look for a job. I had a mechanical engineering degree in my hand and no experience. And so my brother told me, look here, my office is on the West Wharf, and he used to be living in Muhammad Ali Society. And he says, I go to my office early morning at 8 o'clock. I drive to the office, and you come with me and get yourself a suit and get all your certificates and everything into a folder, and hop in the car with me when I go to work tomorrow.
Okay.
I said, okay. So the first day I drove with him, and we went to his office on the West Wharf.
Okay.
So he stops the car at the Qamar House, which is near the tower, nearby the tower. And he says, Khalid, If you go on this side is the West Wharf Road.
Yeah.
There are a lot of engineering companies who may need you. And if you go on this side is what then used to be the McLeod Road.
Oh, yes.
I.I. Chandrika Road.
Yeah.
So he said, I suggest you go just walking this way, look up the signboards outside and try your luck.
Just go in.
Just go in. So I looked at both sides, and he drove the car and went to his office.
He just left you.
And so I said, all right. And I said, this road looks bigger, the I.I. Chandrika Road, which was the McLeod Road. And I just basically just walked. I would see the signboard outside, or there's some multi-storied building, see the engineering firm somewhere.
Yeah.
And just walk up to the reception. I'm an engineer. Then you have a job for me. And so.
How many rejections did you have?
Well, I think about. I did that for a week in one direction.
Really, as long as that?
And yes, and I had been. It was in my second week, and now I thought I'll go into the direction of the West Wharf Road.
Okay.
And one day I just walked there, and there was this company, which was the agents for Mercedes-Benz, and had a big signboard and a beautiful office, and I like, there's an office I would like to work in.
Yeah.
And they were an engineering firm called Nawaz Limited.
Okay, I think it might exist.
Yes, Nawaz Limited, and they had an engineering contract, and they were in the field of air conditioning. They were
perfect.
Agents for Courier air conditioners. So I just walked in and I just said that I'm an engineer. Does the engineering department of your firm doesn't have any job? And the receptionist said, okay. I just gave my CV, and the receptionist went in. And after a while, she says, can you wait? And I waited for 5 minutes, and then somebody came, can you come in?
Oh, right.
And when I went inside, I saw that there was a big drawing board, and
they're having a meeting
some kind of an engineering plans or something been discussed, and there were 3 or 4 people huddled discussing this.
Okay.
And there was this person who then stood up. He says, I'm the chief engineer here. You know air conditioning? I said, yes, I did a project in air conditioning.
Wow.
He says, okay, well, we've got a contract for, there was this big building coming up on I.I. Chandrika Road, which was the American Life Insurance Company head office.
Okay.
Yes.
So you got the job, in short.
And they said, would you like to take? I said, of course. And that's how I started.
So really, I mean, at this moment, just because if you're building up to a master class, would you say that, in life, if you want to achieve something, you have to get up off your backside and get it, because it's not going to come to you? Is that a thing you've practiced? I think you learned it.
Yeah.
You learned some good morals growing up, which is again an important part of business. You now have your job. You're learning to understand that you have to go and fetch. You have to knock on many doors, but one door will open.
Absolutely.
Now, just fast tracking through, you're still having an easy cruise, but I think you then moved on to PIA, and the interesting part about PIA as a flight engineer. But just so part of the learning thinking is that, you realize quickly that the role of a flight engineer was going to be phased out. How did you act? Because here was another turning point in your career.
We realized that the new aircraft technology that was evolving, there would now be greater automation, and the cockpits will now be designed for 2-man operation instead of the third person, which was meaning that they were phasing out all the work that the flight engineer did in the cockpit would now be automated.
Yes.
We said that since we already have cockpit experience, and since we are
it's better easier to retrain.
And we've got a lot
of
long years ahead of us. When the cockpits become 2-man cockpits, at that time PIA should retrain us to be pilots instead of remaining as flight engineers. But here we came against a bit of a conflict of interest with the Pilots Association.
Oh, themselves.
Who said no. They wanted to preserve their territory, and they said there's a lot of unemployed pilots in the country. Why should flight engineers be taking this job? So a bit of a acrimony developed. Yeah. And so a result of that interaction process, I think we had to take a stand.
But actually,
which was not very popular.
but I think you took a stand But I want to learn from you that you actually sacrificed your position in the nicest possible way. I want to
Yes.
understand why you did that.
Yes.
I mean, what did you gain from it?
Yes. One day, in the process of this negotiations and everything, we learned that 2 batches of flight engineers were declared redundant by PIA.
Just like
and that was about 20 or 30 engineers who had already spent their part of training, and because now PIA had stopped inducting flight engineers, and
So
they wanted
just
to,
out.
and they're just out. On that, being their president, I took up a stand with the management, which they said was more on the lines like I was trying to be a union leader or something. It was not although it was meant to be just give them our point of view.
Okay.
So that's where the bit of an acrimony developed, and I had to make a decision, basically.
Well, look, I think the reason I'm asking you this is that, again, this is another point, a lesson in business, that perhaps what you are saying is that, sometimes in life you have to stand up for your principles. In fact, every time in life you must. Because then in business, people will respect you. People will do business with you because they believe you're a man of principle. Again,
It's hard because basically I was faced with a situation when these 2 batches were sort of sacked, that either I give up my stand for them, or I face dismissal.
Exactly. So you stood up for your principle.
Now that was a choice that I had to make, and I said, I did say that no, I think we should continue to support them, and I didn't opt out of it, and so
you paid the price.
Yes, it was very difficult because there was a lot of support and everybody was watching. So I said, all right, if you have to dismiss me. I wouldn't object to it. Fine, I would accept it. But when they dismissed me, they ended up employing them, because it would have been too much, because they wanted me to be the, I was sort of
your scapegoat.
I was the scapegoat.
Perfect.
And those boys remember to this day. Look, I mean, that was a kind of a thing that was there.
So you stood up for your principle.
Yes, years later, there was a review of this, and PI apologized and asked me to come back.
Amazing.
Many years had passed, and I said,
that's very good. I think again, it's a standing up for values. Very important to have the respect of other people who want to do business with you. So now I'm afraid you've had a little bit of a luxurious time talking about your past. Let's go into the beginning of TCS, and I think by that time one of your brothers was in joint venture with DHL at that time, and I think you joined him, as it were, in DHL. Is that what the next move was?
Yes. What happened simultaneously about the time that there was this issue with PIA. It just so happened by chance that my, as I told you, I'm the youngest of the siblings, and my eldest brother, who was over 20 years older than me, about the same time he retired from government service. He came back and he wanted to set up a business of his own. He had been in a senior position in the UAE, and he retired from that and he came back. And so when he discovered I was having this problem, and he wanted to set up a business, and he and I had a chat, and he says, Khalid, if this is so, I'm free, you're free.
Come and join.
Why can't we do something together?
This was in 1982, I think.
This is 1981, 82.
Good.
Yes, and so that's how it happened.
And of course everybody knows what DHL does, but that also became the opportunity when you were in there to start up a domestic courier network to support the international DHL network. I think that was the beginning. You were at that time, I think, in running, chief executive of DHL. What I'd like to know, because these are the sort of quantum leaps that happened, and I remember the post office almost had a monopoly at that time. How did you manage to work, a delivery service domestically with the post office saying, no, you can't deliver letters?
Interesting. It was my brother, basically, who persuaded me, and I owe it to his vision,
of course,
and to him, to his support, that we got into business.
Yeah.
But as soon as we formed this joint venture company, and it's the joint venture with DHL, and DHL at that time was in its mode of expanding its services, and about the time we started in Pakistan, they started about 17 other countries in the region at the same time.
So they were really stretched.
So they were really stretched for management. And so they offered that, if I could go through their systems and I could be trained.
So you're really a DHL man.
So for me, it was, I wanted to make a fresh start in life. I was very keen to, because I'd burnt my boats there.
Flight engineer.
And but the deal was that I would then be their,
Chief executive.
Yes. Comply with the systems and procedures and everything. And so I became therefore the MD for the company in Pakistan. And my brother was the chairman, and my brother also had another business. So he was living in
what was interesting is the TCS concept, which is the domestic, DHL was not allowed to deliver letters and parcels internally within Pakistan. That was the job of the post office.
Yes.
And a monopoly.
Yeah.
So how did you take on the post office, really?
Yeah. Here's a very interesting point. At the time when DHL was approved as a joint venture in Pakistan, it was one of the first joint ventures in services sector where they were allowed repatriation of the dividends.
Yes.
At that time, one of the major impediments that had to be circumvented was that like elsewhere in the world, there was a law which is called the Pakistan Post Office Act of 1898. Right. And this was in line with the laws that the British had made in many other countries, in India,
it made sense at that time.
In the UK and elsewhere. And that was that the postal system set up at the government had a monopoly over the carriage and transmission of letters.
Letters only.
Letters only. Now, this was being there. How could DHL be allowed, given a permission?
Yes.
So a way was found around it, and that was that the permission for DHL mentioned that your activities will be restricted only to the transmission of business-related documents only.
That's a very open type of...
so as not to affect the monopoly of the Pakistan Post Office.
Meaning that you couldn't deliver letters, probably.
Meaning that on one side, the government had made a distinction that the business-related documents were not letter, but on the other side, it left the post office to challenge
that concept.
What is a letter?
My goodness.
So, as soon as we commenced business, we got also into a debate with the post office as to what is a letter, what is not a letter.
Well, yes.
And so that is something that continued for a very long period of time.
Okay.
And with the post office. On another side, another restriction they had placed on DHL was that DHL were allowed to handle only international documents.
Yes.
Look at the rationale being that because we use a global network, so the international documents...
So they were outward looking rather than...
And there was a restriction on DHL to do any
internal
domestic transportation. Now, when I started as the MD for DHL, and I was operating a joint venture, we realized that we go to a customer and the customer says, okay, fine, we've got 5 documents today. 2 are international, but 3 are for Islamabad or for Lahore, for domestic. And we had to say, sorry, sir, but we can't do this.
Only post office can do it.
Only the post office can do it. Or there were some other courier companies who were not joint venture and who were not restricted that way by the government permissions. So we soon realized that we needed a separate
business
to do the domestic part.
Correct, which is not part of DHL.
Yes.
Very good.
So that's how then TCS came into being. And TCS is totally was owned by ourselves, between my brother and myself. And DHL was a joint venture.
So this was the beginning, TCS, the beginning of the national, sort of Pakistan internal delivery system.
Yes.
I want to, perhaps that was in 1985, but there was a breakthrough in the business. Is that correct? Something to do with the banking Banking Act or something. But what I want to explore with you is that, you know, businesses can make quantum leaps. And I want to just examine that concept of quantum leap. So please tell us what happened in this first quantum leap for TCS.
Yeah, tickling old memories.
Yeah, but good ones, I hope.
Look, yeah, we started operating in 1982.
Yeah.
In 83 we commenced TCS.
Yes.
So we kept a kind of an arm's length relationship between DHL and TCS, but initially because we were operating from the same premises, and then we started separating
separate business.
The two, so that because this was a joint venture and this was fully owned. Now, over the next couple of years, when the growth took place, in terms of the volumes, and not perhaps in revenue terms, but in volumes, there was more growth in TCS.
Yes.
And so
there was a bigger market.
Yes, there was a bigger market. There was a greater need. Where DHL documents were in hundreds, TCS used to be in thousands.
Of course.
And so there was a need.
Yeah.
And although the post office was breathing down our neck and saying, "Hey, you can't do this. Hey, you can't do this," but we had this little window.
All right.
In 1985, third year of TCS, we got a surprise call one day.
Okay.
And the call was from the Pakistan Banking Council. The Pakistan Banking Council in 1985 was a kind of a coordination body which coordinated the activities of the 5 major nationalized banks of Pakistan. The 5 major banks of Pakistan was the National Bank, the Habib Bank, UBL, MCB, Muslim Commercial Bank, and ABL.
So it's the whole banking network.
So this was the Pakistan's major banks, and they functioned under the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
And they were coordinated by the Pakistan Banking Council.
Okay.
And the call came from the Pakistan Banking Council. Please, could you come up to our headquarters? And we have to talk to you. So we went to the head office of the Pakistan Banking Council, which was in the tallest building in Pakistan, the Habib Bank Plaza. On the 22nd floor or 23rd floor was the head office of the Pakistan Banking Council. And all these banks were nationalized banks owned by the government at that time.
It's a real powerhouse, you know, representing thousands.
Yes. So we were, quite sort of awed as to why being called for a meeting on the 23rd floor of the Habib Bank Plaza, and there was a meeting, very high powered. All the banks' representatives were there, and the Secretary General, or the General Secretary, I think, of the Pakistan Banking Council. One very portly gentleman, Mr. Agha Fasiuddin.
Let's not go into that.
and he said, "Look here, we've got a challenge for you."
Yeah.
And the challenge is that the finance minister of Pakistan at that time was Dr. Mahbub al-Haq.
Okay.
He was a very enlightened, future-looking. He has given us a challenge, and that is that the banks had a certain transaction time that he wanted to speed up. And that was that in case there's somebody from, say, Lahore has come and made a transaction with somebody in Karachi and written a check, then these outstation checks were taking about 3 weeks before the money would come.
It's a long time for the money to be stuck into the...
So the finance minister gave them a kind of a performance improvement document they called the charter.
Okay.
And the charter said that you should improve, amongst other things that he had to do. One of the things they had to do was that this time from 3 weeks has to be cut to 72 hours.
Wow, that's a big ask.
And now, when they started figuring it out, of course it meant they had to do some of their internal, rework their own internal processes, but they also then needed some kind of a connectivity between the branches. And the Pakistan Post Office was perhaps not adequately geared for that.
But probably overstretched anyway.
Overstretched at that time. So he says, roughly, the thing is that we have got, between these 5 banks, we've got 6,500 branches. 6,500 branches across the country. Is there anyone amongst you who could provide an overnight, second day, or as fast as possible, a delivery service between coordinating between any of these 6,500 branches.
From any point to any point.
From any point to any point.
Anywhere in Pakistan.
Now, my eyes lit up when I heard that, because I knew that I had read the history of Federal Express, how it was founded, in the U.S. in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And that was based on the Federal Express, because the founder of Federal Express went to the Federal Reserve in the U.S. and said that I like to set up for you a delivery system,
so
linking the banks basically started with the
so
banks.
you could see that it had been done.
So I knew it had parallels, but we were far, far removed, our environment and our resources.
And how big Pakistan is, and how connected it was at that time.
So I said, anybody likes to take up this challenge.
Yeah.
And we were about 4 or maybe 5 companies that had been called. All the courier companies that were there had been called for this interview. And so we were sitting dazzled, and I looked at my operations head who had come with me, and I said, it looks exciting.
Very tempting.
All right. So the meeting, when they wound up the meeting, he said, but remember one thing, we have no budget for this.
What?
So if you think, when you work out if you want to work out a business plan or something, we have no budget, because the finance minister hasn't given us any budget to set up the system. So it will be minimal, and the more that we can give you is 8 rupees that we would give perhaps to the post office.
8 rupees for one delivery?
For one delivery, from anywhere to anywhere.
My God. I know 8 rupees at that time is a bit more, but yet.
So they said, how long will it take you to come back? Because he has given us timelines. And I said, okay, we'll come back to you. Give us a week, we'll come back to you.
1 week?
They said, okay, 1 week, you're coming back, and give us. I said, okay, 1 week, and there's a meeting, you're coming back exactly a week from now, we'll come.
And how many of those courier companies put their hand up?
After a week, we went back.
Yes.
And we did all the work. How can we do it? Can we really do it? There were a lot of challenges, operational challenges,
I can
organizational challenges. How will we get so many people? We asked, they gave us some information of
how many courier, how many transport?
The banks were organized as regional, administratively, they were regional setups. So they had regional managers, they had zonal heads. And so if we were to do that, we were to set up counterparts at the regional level, at the zonal levels, who would interact with the banks for aligning our procedures, and all the
it's a huge amount.
It was a huge amount. Meant suddenly having number of people.
Delivery cars.
Yes, it was a stupendous task. Anyway, 1 week, the next appointed day, I went with my operations head to there, and they were all there, all the banks, and they were in full quorum, but we were the only courier company who turned up.
Well, obviously they were.
The others didn't even turn up.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I said, okay,
we accept. We have no choice.
I said, we'll like to try it. We can't do the entire country. But maybe we can do it in steps. And so that's.
So I mean, if we were to learn a very big lesson from this, I would say a quantum leap. I think that was a turning point for TCS. From an ordinary, business delivering the occasional parcel, you were a very serious player. My question, and perhaps for those young people watching, was this some sort of crazy gamble that you took, or was it astute, well thought out plan? Don't answer that until I finish. What would you say to people watching that these opportunities were there for 6 courier companies? Only 1 courier company put their hand up. We know, looking back, of course, you were hugely successful in how you accomplished that. But what is the lesson here? What was going through your mind? How were you going to make that promise a reality, a success? Please share with us that mindset more than anything.
Honestly, if you were to be just astute, it is not a very wise thing to do, to take on a commitment as big, especially when you have not done it before. You don't have experience. There are a lot of variables.
Yes, of course.
what has to be very important is that desire. There has to be that great desire in you. I want to do something. I want to make it. That desire has to exceed
the fear,
caution, the fear of failure that really impedes us. But even then, you can't be rash. You know that. There's a chance. There's more than. So somewhere between astuteness and rashness is somewhere is a middle ground. I think where what impels you is a great desire and willing to take a chance, a bit of a risk.
So it really is a calculated risk. Of course, if it was a sure shot, then it would never be a risk anyway.
It's a calculated risk, but Feroze, when you take risks like this in life, and you just pray to God, help me God, I just want to do it. God helps in ways that you had not imagined. One of the first things I encountered very soon was suddenly we needed vehicles.
Yes.
We needed to induct so much staff all across the country. And when I went for the vehicles and we calculated the number of vans and scooters and these kind of things we required, it was a tidy sum of money. And first we thought, okay, we'll go to these banks and ask them, we got this contract from you, can you finance it? And when we went to them, they were totally bureaucratic. They said, sorry, you don't have any assets. You are,
service company.
Because all our offices were rented. We were a service company, and so we don't have, and our business plan was not. We couldn't demonstrate, any precedence. So they wouldn't give. And at that time, a very interesting thing happened. I had been to 2 or 3 banks, and one day I came back to my office very dejected. My secretary said to me, "Sir, there's you're looking quite disappointed, but I want to mention something." I said, "Yes." He says, this mechanic who comes to who services our existing fleet. He had once told me, and that tell Khalid Saab that if he ever requires any vehicles, he should ask me.
Wow.
So you mind my tapping him for that and just asking him? I said, "There's no harm. Ask him." So it was the mechanic who had a small little modest workshop. And so the next morning, this gentleman appears in my office.
The mechanic.
This mechanic. And he comes very enthusiastically, and he says he brings 2 guests with him.
Okay.
And these are 2 guests, and they said they'll just want to come and meet you. So and he brings these 2 tall pathans in salwar kameez. And they
so not really business people.
They're not really business. I mean, they're business people, but they're and they come and sit in my office. And the moment they sat, a telephone rang, and it was an international call. And I said, "Yeah, Betty," and I served them some tea. But for the next 10-15 minutes, I was on an international call. There was some customers who had a problem. And by the time the tea arrived, they were just finished. And they were now, by the time I said, "Yes, what can I do for you?" They said, "हम आपको मिलने के लिए आए थे, and हमने देख लिया जो देखना था."
So he'd already interviewed you effectively.
I was all the time on the phone. I said,
probably watching.
Yes, and I didn't even understand at that time the significance of the visit. So this mechanic and these 2, they just walk out, shook hands, and they went away. And half an hour later, he calls me and says, "Tell me how many vehicles you need."
Wow. So that was sort of a... I hope the secretary got a bonus. So the lesson here might be, Khalid, that God helps those who help themselves.
Yes, and many times in life.
And the other point, probably, just as we are talking, is that when you have a passion in something, people recognize that passion. They watch you, and what they were doing effectively were interviewing you in the best possible way. They were listening to your passion, and they realize that if an individual has such immense commitment, well, their money is going to be safe with you. So these are turning points. Your passion was driving you, and as I said, God helps those who help themselves. So absolutely. I think you and God, were on the same path, if you like. Well, I think that's a very beautiful story. But of course, it's you know, Pakistan is not an easy country to operate in, and I think you had further challenges probably from the post office at that time, and I know you were relating to me a very interesting story about that. Again, part of that learning process. So, from what I recall, the post office now realized that you were a serious competitor. You know, you were languishing, you know, scratching around before, but now you had this big contract servicing 6,500 branches. Yeah, you were now making waves.
Mm-hmm.
And so the post office decided to get aggressive. Please tell us another story on your
Yes, the post office got aggressive. Under the post office law, you know, they had the exclusive privilege for transportation of letters. But of course, the government had said business-related documents are not letters. So we would say anytime. But they said, okay, we want to check your parcels, and we want to check your... so they would, at random, you know, make a raid or make something. But what was very disconcerting, at that time, the Director General of the Post Office happened to be a very aggressive man. And he started giving press interviews and statements in the press saying that this is illegal activity.
Illegal activity?
Yes, and they are violating the Pakistan Post Office Act, and we would not only just prosecute the courier companies, but people who use them also.
My goodness, that's quite...
So when that came, at that point, he was getting a little too aggressive now, and at that time I went to Federal Ombudsman.
Okay, we had an Ombudsman.
Justice Sardar Iqbal at that time, and we made a case before the Ombudsman, because Ombudsman office was at that time
and it's an independent
arbitrator. And we made our case that here we are doing this business under, you know, these are the provisions under which we do it. We're doing a useful service, and here is this man coming and disturbing us. So at that time, the Ombudsman case, we like to say it was in our favor, but the Post Office interprets it as in their favor. But then they became a little smarter. What they did was that under the Post Office Act, all that they can do was fine us 50 rupees.
Per delivery?
Yes, per delivery.
Okay.
And now they became smart. They said, we are not going to use that.
Okay.
They invoked a very creative provision of the criminal law.
My goodness.
Saying that where this company says they are not carrying letters, but in effect they are carrying letters, so it's a fraud. And
also there's no definition for letter.
So it's a fraud. Because it's a fraud, so we want to want to find criminal proceedings against them.
My goodness.
so that became a little aggressive,
I think.
So we had to then sort of
that could put an end to the business.
Yeah, that could well have put an end to the business. But then, fortunately, even within the government, people could see, you know, that the whole thing, and so we came under tremendous pressure. Then we went to the government for, okay, why don't you amend the law?
Yes.
And at that time, it was the government of Prime Minister Junejo at that time, under President Ziaul Haq.
Yeah.
And so we asked them, can you please change the law? Because they said, okay, but what's happening in other countries? So we gave them the precedents of other countries, what UK had done, you know, how to accommodate the postal monopoly as well as to allow the private
So there could be some competition
what happened
in
the US and how other countries, we gave all that presentation to them. But, you know, we engaged them, but it wasn't the priority of the government, some of the other things. And then suddenly, General Ziaul Haq, as if you would remember, he died in a plane crash.
Yes, I do remember.
And before that, the Junejo government had been sacked.
Yeah.
And there came an interim government for 3 months.
Yes.
So the post office at that time, during the period of the interim government, through their minister, who was the same minister who was in the interim government, you know, one day made a agenda point in the cabinet meeting that these companies are too much of a, sort of a threat to the Pakistan Postal Office, Postal Service, so they should be closed. And it came in a cabinet meeting.
My goodness, sir.
Luckily, I came to know about it a day before.
Yeah.
And
a day before?
A day before.
I mean, that wasn't enough time.
Yeah, because it was a caretaker government. They had just 3 months. They were going on a very fast track.
Yeah.
And so we came to know, say on a Monday evening, that on Wednesday there is a cabinet meeting, and then the agenda item.
And that could be the end of TCS.
That could have been the end of TCS. And so that night I made a half-a-page note.
Yes.
And I said, the only people who can really help is the cabinet members at this time. And I just took off for Islamabad. Just without any appointment?
Without
any appointment. I had only one day, and how many people I could meet, and I could tell them.
And how could you meet them, of course?
Luckily, on my flight to Islamabad that morning, 7 o'clock flight to Islamabad, I had booked my seat in a great hurry. I got a seat in the first class. It used to be then first class in the economy in the PIA. And I just across the aisle came and sat the finance minister, Dr. Mahbubul Haq.
Just by chance.
This is 1988.
Wow.
And whom in 1985 he had set up the...
So he is the man who's the architect of this.
Yes. So he remembered, and he was still the minister.
My goodness.
Now, in that caretaker setup.
Yeah.
And so I said, and I had made that half-page note, and I made 4 or 5 cyclo-style copies.
Cyclo-style?
Cyclo-style, because that's the time,
yes.
They used to be.
Okay.
And I had said I'd give it to each.
Yeah.
And the moment he sat in his seat, and I said, I'm going to go and give it to him, he just fell asleep.
My goodness, that's not
He just fell asleep.
That's not nice.
And I said, I can't wake him up. And the flight, when it was landing at Islamabad, he just woke up.
So you held your nerve.
I held my nerve, and just as the seatbelt signs put on and they're announcing the arrival, he wakes up.
My goodness, thankfully he did.
I just went up and said, sir, you were attending a cabinet meeting the day after tomorrow. And there's a small little note I've made for you. Can you please read it?
Yeah.
And he said, who are you? I said, sir, I'm so-and-so. He says, okay, I don't remember, but, oh, that project that you did a good job.
You mean he remembered?
He remembered. This is, let me read it. So I remember when the aeroplane was just sort of landing and taxiing into it, and I was reading this paper. And while getting out of the, the VIPs had to go first, he just tapped me. He says, okay, I understood it. You have my support. And that day, next day, I met about 3 or 4 other ministers that we could just meet.
Yes.
And it's interesting how when the cabinet meeting took place, I was told that there were 4 or 5 members who said, no, this is not to happen. So there have been many, these are kind of
yes, but I think what you learn, you are applying a principle that you learned early in your life. The principle of saying, I need to get up from my backside and do something to save my company. These things don't happen. You need to have the courage, you need to have the guidance, and of course, as we said, God helps those who help themselves. But this was all part of your genetic by now.
Yeah, because unless you don't, if you don't do that, you will die. You'll just finish.
Exactly. So
people will trample.
I think we'll take a little break, Khalid, and when we come back, I think I'm just going to put some more heat in the oven here with Khalid, and we'll talk about the challenges that one has to face in a Pakistan business, both inside the business and outside the business. So back to you in a little while after the break. Khalid, you know that TCS is a well-recognized business, and actually there have been references to TCS case study in many international business studies. Actually, one of the most important ones, of course, is for Harvard Business School, where TCS is actually a case study for undergraduate students. one of the
MBS.
MBA. Well, even better. And I'm actually a fan of this other book by Daniel Eisenberg. I won't give it the actual title, but it's an amazing book, and it talks about TCS. Actually, the way he defines TCS is that, you know, not only is this company and this country environment in which you operate hot in the kitchen, but it's also hot outside. Can you quickly tell us what is the hottest part in the kitchen in operating the business? What's the biggest challenge in operating the business on a day-to-day level?
The hottest part, if you in the kitchen, if it could be really, I would call it
the operating area.
In the operating thing.
Yeah.
Like in most businesses, as you know, with the developments of technology and with the outreach being higher, and the way the business landscape is changing, I think the biggest challenge is that we continue to operate efficiently, well into the future, and respond to our customers' needs in a manner that is efficient and makes us the best solution for them. And that translates into allocation of resources and development of human resource and training and strategic thinking for the company. So that is the internal part of it.
So we stay with that. I think you know, I looked at your core values, and you also have, TC has amazing core values of quality, profitability through efficiency, ethics, justice, creative growth. I mean, these are ingrained in the business. I think what you are saying, Khalid, if I may paraphrase, I think is what John Rockefeller said. I think the secret of success is to do the common things uncommonly well. I think TCS works like a well-oiled machine on a day-to-day level and allows you to deal with the challenges, so the resources can be available when things go wrong or you have things, you know, that come up. I think that may be your lesson, to say everything, people are trained properly, they're staffed properly, you know, there's resourced properly, technology up to date, so the day-to-day things work well. Is that fair? I think
the most important thing is to create an environment, a working environment within the organization, where people feel respected, where people feel secure, and where they feel that it is their organization and the job satisfaction and fulfillment. I think that is the most important things. Easier said than done, because it calls for a lot of discipline and following rigidly, you know, some of those values. But
those corporate values that you have, which is your mantra, I think. So you need to run a business. I think what you're saying is that you need to have certain principles and standards. You have to set an example and make those run, you know, if you like what Rockefeller said, the common things done uncommonly well. I think that would be a good example. So resources can be diverted to crisis. Now, let's look at, you know, I think in Pakistan operating, and all the case studies show that actually the biggest challenge about operating in Pakistan is it is hot outside. You know, you deal every day with challenges that no other country would have to deal with, virtually no other country. I want to ask you one or two questions on those, if you don't mind. The first point really is that you are a company, I think, with which is non-politically aligned. So in a culture of favor, how do you manage to stay upright and carry on your business when everybody else is pulling favors around you?
Yes, I mean, we have never needed favors, because your basic business model is such that you thrive basically on your customers, and the favors, if at all, have to be from the customers. And your proposition is sound, and you are an ethical company, and that one of the things that we've tried to ingrain is that, and that was my message on the 20th anniversary, that, you know, we have a love affair with our customers. which means we've got to learn to love our customers,
Yes.
even whether they are right, whether they are wrong, even if they are wrong, even in that there's a learning for
so
us.
service really is paramount.
It's a service culture, and that is more important. And favors and all, I think so long as they fulfill a need.
No, what I meant is other
somebody-
people are pulling favors. Well, you have to, you have to run your business in difficult circumstances.
Doesn't matter in the bigger scheme of
Very
things.
good. So as long as your business is transparent, and I think more importantly, honest.
Yes.
You pay your taxes, I know. So you're transparent, you're open.
Yeah.
And that makes you strong, resilient, and you don't need favors. I think that's what
In
you're saying.
transparency lies
Yeah.
your security sometimes.
Perfect. I like that
Absolutely.
answer. I think, again, a quote you made in the book, which I really like, it says, it's like you it is like a circus performer on a high wire. You never look down, you only look up. I think you have to have that optimism, I think, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is that how do you navigate your way through unforeseen circumstances? Because in Pakistan, the law can change quickly, the circumstances can change quickly. How do you get geared up to deal with the unexpected?
There will always be unexpected in business,
And more so in an environment which is politically not so even.
Yes, yeah. So for that, I think basically so long as your orientation and your direction is right, apolitical, because we are not aligned to any political ideas and all that. Not that we don't respect them,
No.
but we respect everybody. We are in the service of the people of Pakistan, to whatever political parties or communities that they believe.
So your business speaks for itself.
Absolutely. And so I think it's the service of the common man.
Yeah.
And I've seen even major political leaders, the other day somebody mentioned on the CCTV, a major political leader came to one of our express centers and booked a document and was actually paying the cash,
Perfect.
which he would very rarely, have that. So that's nice of them, but our long term, so our destiny is linked to the prosperity and well-being of the people of Pakistan and our customers, and in their prosperity lies our future.
I'm now going to, I think what you're saying is that if you run a business which is open, transparent and honest, pays its taxes, has a good internal culture, it has its own life and its own protection and security.
Absolutely.
Nobody can touch you. Now, just to turn to sort of winding up process here in this amazing learning interview with you, Khalid, I want to ask you one slightly personal yet business question, but a learning point. In Pakistan we have a culture where family members take over from generation to generation. Sometimes obviously it can be good, sometimes it may not be. This is a blessing, but yet it could be a curse. Now, this is not a personal point. It's about teaching Pakistan businesses some lesson. So what would your guidance be on balancing family expectations and actually good business decisions?
I think the most important thing to consider here is that it is in everybody's interest, the family and the business, that the business does well.
Agreed.
Okay, so I think when you are talking of a family business, it's the most important decisions criteria should really be what is good for the business, and keep the family considerations a little bit on the. It's important. For example, the decision has to be made on the interest of the family versus the business interest of the business. I think the interest of businesses take precedence, because the family would in any case benefit.
So really you're saying best man for the job.
Best man for the job.
Perfect. I think, I hope people listening will follow that advice, because I've seen and observed so many high-class businesses set up by the visionary leader in the family and then really go to ruin because the next generation have not been the right people to deal with it.
Because it may happen that there may be a conflict of interest between the families interest and the business interest.
Now, really the most important question is your very charming wife, Sadia, has been in your business life, of course in your personal life. She is in the scene, if you like, and behind the scenes. Or in other words, in or outside the kitchen, if you like. Tell me, who is the real boss?
Well, the best way of describing it, she's my best friend.
I think you
and I think yes, without her support, wouldn't have been able to achieve, anything. Of course, I like to acknowledge that there's a lot of people that one needs to acknowledge, and the teams, the people who have worked with me. But of course, the closest is your wife, and she's been a great support. At times when you make even unpopular decisions, sometimes you have to make hard choices and unpopular decisions. To even take risks sometimes.
I think you're right. Without the support of your spouse and your guidance and your counsel and your discussion, I think you would not have achieved possibly as much as you have.
I've been very fortunate.
Yes, I know Sadia. She is a wise and charming person. Now, almost last question here. Khalid, I look at you and you have this very gentle smile on your face. But I have seen so much adversity that the business has to go through, but yet you have that calmness about you. What is this that makes you able to do it? Most people would be, dare I say, tearing their hair out.
I think the realization that, our destiny is shaped by God and His greater wisdom, and whatever He feels best for us. And I think we have far, far more to be grateful to God than to crib for any of our, we may encounter small little things on the way. And the bigger scheme of things, when God is kind, it also brings an obligation on your part to respond to the responsibility that comes,
So do you think you fulfilled your destiny? And if you think it's a question of destiny? Or you're on the way there,
I haven't ever thought of it that way. Every day brings its own. Brings its own, and
well, Khalid, it's been a great pleasure having you. I hope viewers that you have had a masterclass from Khalid as to how you can run a world-class company from Pakistan. As interviewer, I probably have the last word on this, so I close by saying that, there is no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. Thank you, viewers, for being here with us today, and thank you, Khalid Awan.
Thank you.